are inevitably doing the will of the universe. In magic, these are seen as indistinguishable. That every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself. And as long as you are doing the will of the universe, then it is impossible to do anything wrong.
Between everybody and his total environment.
Hey, welcome to a traveling episode of Prag Magic in the outskirts here of Oregon in a very popular city, which we will not name. But anyways, I'm here with, do you pronounce it Tad or is it Thad?
It's Thad.
I've always wanted Thad. Thad McKraken.
That's how you pronounce my fake name. And
right. I would call it it's your magical name, right? We all got
a magical name.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. The story on how I took that name is actually a weird one that involves weird psychic phenomenon. But we could get into that later if you want to. I feel like we didn't get through introductions yet, man. So go ahead. Keep going.
Well, yeah, I'm going to write that down because we're definitely getting back to that one. Welcome to this liminal stream. Thad is, a friend of mine, fellow Seattleite, a classic Seattleite, not like my poser ass as a Seattleite. And also a psychonautic audiomancer, ex-disinfo.com editor-in-chief, writer, so many things. Good to have you, Thad.
Good to be here, man. I always like to talk about weird shit. So I actually went to a dinner party a few nights ago, and it was great. Dinner party, great people, everything. But it's just, it's just like this reminder how, in my regular life, I never actually talk about weird shit.
Yeah.
Like the conversation is normally just, I've kind of sort of like programmed myself to behave like a normal human being, and I think that's maybe what differentiates me from a lot of people that are just crazy is like, I understand, how to be that person.
To delineate.
I understand exactly how to act normal, and I'm good at it,
Interesting,
It's also just really weird because there's this whole, secret side to your life that you're not really talking about.
I'm still... for all intents and purposes, I'm still in the broom closet for a lot of things. I told people that I'm staying out here with, doing my outdoor education with, they're like, what are you doing? Why do you need the doors to be, closed? And like, if you can keep the noise down. It's like, I'm doing a podcast. What's the podcast about? Magic. Oh, is it magic with the K again? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm surprised I let you work with kids, man. Like I said, I do stuff under a fake name. I was thinking that.
Well, we actually have we have a lot, like we're all ne'er-do-well, naysaying weirdos, witches, that teach these kids how to create fire from nothing. I mean, it's magic in like the most realist sense, right? The most applicable sense. Everything from archery to respecting nature and sit spots and meditations. And so it makes sense how it transposes, Mm-hmm. And it's funny too, because, and I wanted to talk to you about this. I've been getting in a lot of gruffs on Twitter and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And especially I would say some disconcerting, upheaval with communicating with my father, who's a big AI person. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And like that kind of delineation in and of itself, that mixture between, the unseen world, the more than human world, and then the ones that we create. Now, I understand that like AI is a sort of hypersigil in and of itself because we are creating, these living kind of organisms and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of like political context for me as far as it superseding, the actual artwork and intent or processes of AI. Yeah. And I know that you're like very much within the computer kind of paradigm in your life. So yeah, I was wondering what your ideas of all this is.
Well, I'm a tech guy, and what's interesting is, I mean, as far as like the AI art specifically, that's been an odd controversy for me, because you can see maybe a teeny bit of my art behind me, but I'm a visual artist as well. I've been doing it for years. I've been doing digital art, right? And so the art that I make has not really been that far away from AI art in the first place. It's like definitely a human doing it, but I'm taking my photographs and mashing them together in Photoshop. And as a guitar player, I've always been using a very effects pedal heavy guitar player, and I've been making beats and stuff since I was a kid, like in the 90s. Mm-hmm. So I've always blended those two things together. That's kind of like what I've the point of, I mean, the fundamental essence of the art that I've made over the years. And yet, I mean, I'm also probably the biggest critic of tech in the world. I mean, where it's gone, because so much of it is just conspicuous consumerism. And I was one of the ones that accurately called what it dooms, like, some people forget now, like back in 2008 or so, after the economy crashed and like iPhones and smartphones started to be a real big thing, there was just this like zeitgeist of, we need more tech, like everything needs to be more STEM, and computers. Right. And I was always like, nah, that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, like that's just going to make things worse. And there were spiritual reasons towards that as well. I mean, one, it was pretty obvious that the people, I mean, taking the most powerful technology that humankind has ever created, and then applying it to capitalism. Like, people are investing in technology, and they're investing in it for a reason. The idea is that this technology is going to make the people that are investing in it more money. So that's literally what you're programming it to do. And they've always very much been anti-labor as well, just like openly anti-labor. And that's been a like, I work for a tech company now, and like, I'm being asked to design the software that's basically going to eventually take my job. That's part of what I do for a living. Hey, can you help us work on this project?
Interesting.
And like, that's always been part of it, right? And so it's been a bigger disaster than I ever imagined it would be, though. Like, I never really thought it was going to, like, social media was going to lead to fascism. Like, I wasn't that bad. But I mean, I think one thing, I mean, more than anything, with the tech explosion, I have seen one thing that really disturbs me, and the downside of it, there was a couple downsides to tech too, with the tech explosion. If you read between the fine line, it was like, well, it's going to rapidly accelerate the destruction of the universe, or the destruction of the environment, and it's going to make wealth inequality way worse, which it did both of those things. And those are minor downsides, right? Oh, just a minor thing. It's going to make wealth inequality worse, and
casualties.
Rapidly, and as it turns out, those are kind of big things, making wealth inequality worse and accelerating the destruction of the environment. Those are like minor downsides to it. But also the other downside, in my mind, and this is the big one, is that it was leading fundamentalist materialists in the wrong direction. Fundamentally, it's making people think that the computers are the answer. And there's always been a link in psychedelic culture and computers, which I've always sort of called bullshit on. Like, I mean, I like computers, but there's just such a level of conformity, because the answer can't be mysticism, right? Because we live in a culture where the one thing we know for sure is that mysticism is bullshit, and we all act like that. We all act like it's bullshit. We have our weird shows, but most of the time we act like that's bullshit.
Right. It's like, it does get more primal and subjective than mysticism.
And so the more success you're getting with computers, the more you're just deluding yourself into thinking that is the answer. And fundamentally, like, psychedelic people being into computers, and that's been a big thing since the 90s, the blending of psychedelic culture and tech culture. When I was growing up, it's like, it's been a big thing. And I'm like,
Robert Anton Wilson, all that,
Well, Leary was into it, Psychedelics stimulate the natural power of the human imagination, and you know what computers have to do with that? Nothing. Literally nothing. Right. Like, that's not what computers do. They're a totally different thing. Now, you can use psychedelics to increase creativity to do pretty much anything, right? You can, if you want to use psychedelics to come up with more novel ideas, you can use that to build better computers, which is what happened, but it's inherently not the thing. Virtual reality isn't lucid dreaming, right?
Right.
Like, virtual reality is an attempt to create some kind of objective lucid dreaming, but it's not lucid dreaming. So as somebody who's always been into the thing, I'm always like, computers are just a metaphor for the thing that you're into. They're not the thing itself. And
so in that sense, I guess I see the argument with it then, like the computer being a talismanic kind of operating system, right? So like you programming it, that's kind of the intention and processes within it. What I mean is kind of this like boon of, you know, these AI art generators where it's, you know, you type in some keywords and then you're using that art, you know, as your cover art, as your, you know, it just seems like you're missing so much of the intention with the processes. But I know, I sound like Steve Albini talking about fucking music, right?
Really not as much shit as I just talked about tech. Like, I'm not as against the AI art kind of thing, but make no bones about it. You know, the point is to fuck over labor. Like, that's the real reason.
Yeah.
They pay artists. So the reason this technology was designed fundamentally was so they don't have to pay artists. You know, God, what is sadder than what tech has done to music? You know, like it's awful.
Oh yeah,
absolutely fucking awful. You know, it's like, as a musician, not only that, digital media. You know, no, it's kind of crazy that I at a point in my life, I was starting to become successful with, like, you know, I had aspired to be an internet writer and a musician for years, and I was actually finding a level of success with those things with disinfo, and then tech like killed both of them. You know?
Yeah.
So, you spent your life like, oh, this is this thing I want to be, and then I actually started like being that thing, and then it was like, nah, that's not really even a thing anymore. You know,
that's an interesting tether.
Writing on the internet, nobody makes money from music anymore. So those two things that you were like aspiring to, tech just came in and just like wiped them both out. And so, you know, you know, at the same time, it gives more opportunity. You know, it's not like all bad. Like there's good aspects of it, obviously, but like it is pretty fucked up.
It's an interesting tether too, just about like how disinfo.com went down. And I think listeners, I mean, if anyone followed this podcast, it's pretty rare. But you know, we talked about we had the episode where we talked about the actual downfall of disinfo, and a lot of it was because of the copyrighted material that was used. You know, pictures of Doctor Strange and all of that, you know, they went in and were like, oh, you can't use that. And then there was such a big cachet of copyrighted material that it was like, it's just got to go down. We can't go through it all. And then I feel it's interesting that, like, does Midjourney not own the copyrights, you know, to the things that you're inputting in? Does, you know,
well, I mean,
I feel
we weren't. Yeah, I mean, there was legitimate copyright concerns, and there has been for years. And when I was running it, I didn't make that situation any better, but I progressively made it slightly worse. So, you know, I mean, it wasn't my fault. People had been doing that, but yeah, I mean, basically, the way I was doing it, I was running it like a blog, but it was actually filed as a for-profit business. And there's actually like a lot of loopholes that you can use to get around like copyright, like images. And I wasn't versed on it. And nobody had been, like, nobody was running the site was like,
yeah, we had no idea.
It had nothing to do with me. So, I mean, it was legit. Like, there were copyright violations, but I don't think anybody had really, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what was going on with that, to be all honesty, but like, yeah, I mean, tech did ruin the site too, because one of the sites that are the people that above Top Secret that ran the site into the ground designed that website, and that website was a piece of fucking garbage. That was part of the problem. It's like,
wait, above Top Secret, isn't that the name of the David Wilcock documentary or whatever?
God, what is it? I mean, that's what people like. Above Top Secret is the website. They're now a right-wing propaganda website, by the way. It's like, I was gonna say. It's like a message board, and they took over Disinfo and they ran it to the ground and lost 3/5 of its 4/5 of its readership in less than a year, and just left it. Crap. And so that's how I ended up taking it over and running it. And like, man, I'm fully, like, admittedly not the best person to be running a website. You know, it's just not. I'm more of a writer than I'm like a guy who runs a website. You know,
right?
Like,
yeah.
I'm more of like an artist. Like, I never really wanted to be an editor, and there's actually a really good reason for that. Is like, one form of mind control, and I think this has gotten even worse with social media age, with like trending topics and stuff, is, you know, when something is trending and it's going one direction, like, I just have this personality where I'm like, I want to think about anything other than that thing that you're telling me to think about. And to run a website, you gotta like, you gotta have hot takes on the trending topics, right?
Right.
I never wanted to do that. Like, that's not something I wanted to be doing, and like, I know, like, to run a website, like, that's what you have to fucking do. And so I did it for years, but no, I don't miss it at all. But,
but also, the SEO and all of that marketability too was just ridiculous, and it became like and we talked about this last time too, but like it became such an incendiary platform for, a lot of brave individuals to air their grievances about everything, under the sun.
It was pretty fucking awful. Yeah, and I don't even want to get into that much. I mean, I'd rather talk weird spiritual stuff, but like, man, the literal Russian propaganda, the intellectual dark web. One of the last articles that I wrote about that was just basically pointing out that the supposedly intellectual dark web was just, I mean, this is 4 years ago. This was a new thing at the time, was basically just a rebranding of conservative Christianity, which it obviously was. It's like they're just trying to rebrand the Republican Party because after Bush, like, they knew that young people didn't like it. So they're just trying to, like, I mean, it's such an easy concept to understand. It's a rebranding. And like, they're all like denying that the right wingers are like, no, we're not right wingers. We're classical liberals or whatever. Like the dumb fucking Rogan set. And fast forward 4 years later,
the Dave Rubin bullshit. Yeah.
4 years later, Jordan B. Peterson now works for Ben Shapiro, and Joe Rogan is actively telling his listeners to vote Republican in the next election. So, and you know how many people argued with me with this? You know how many, like, anytime I saw a comment on this, there was 9 people who were like, they're not right wingers. They say they're not. And I'm like, well, 4 years later, they were fucking right wingers the whole time, obviously. Right. So like vaccine and the fucking straight up Russian. I mean, we were running Russian propaganda for years. Not to mention that, like, the concept, I mean, like, some of the most popular things on disinfo for years were just bullshit. Like, it was like some of the most popular stuff was, as they call it, fake news. It was just nonsense,
I mean, my most popular article on disinfo was about the thing in Damascus, Oregon, which turned out to be a total LARP. It was completely ridiculous, but people really loved the superstition of it.
My brother texted me about that piece because we were going down to Oregon, and he's like, "Oh, maybe we should." I'm just like, dude, it's bullshit. Like,
it's total bullshit.
That was one of the
it,
most popular things on the site for years. Like, I mean, like, I think 1 year that was like one of the most like popular things.
That's so funny to me. Yeah, because like I made it a point, like in a journalistic sense too, to dispel the illusions. Like, I talked to the woman that owned it and found out about the insurance fraud of the dentist who owned it. And like, no one wanted to hear that. They're like, no, we're still going to go take photos in front of it because it's like where, Eyes Wide Shut was filmed or some bullshit like that. It's so funny to me.
Funny story, and maybe this could lead into synchronicities, because this is a story that's good synchronicity. It kind of leads out of disinfo, but it's just a nature of like how fucked up that was, at the time, because we're talking like 2016, right? 2015, 2016.
I would say, 2016, 2017, maybe
2018, yeah. And so one of the things I write about is synchronicities, and how one thing that I noticed is that when I started writing more about synchronicities that happen in my life, because of surveillance technology, and we were just talking about like everything that I do does involve tech, but again, I'm a critic of how tech is being used. I think like tech is a part of you. That's what we don't understand, and the internet is essentially a metaphor for the fact that consciousness is connected. We're just doing it in a really fucked up way, but also, I mean, you are the tech. There is a connection between, and that's a fundamental to like what I do. And so when I started writing for disinfo, and I still do this to this day, and I've actually done it more since 2020, the start of the pandemic, because I just started writing down synchronicities that happen in my life. It's like, because it seems like a lot of them happen. So I started tracking them, right? And when I started doing this, I realized like a lot of these, because of surveillance tech, like you can prove that, it's like, it's not just me saying, hey, this crazy synchronicity happened. It's like, this absolutely happened. Like there's a trail on it. And one of the articles I wrote from disinfo was about Pizzagate. And the reason I wrote about Pizzagate was because there was this blog that I had reposted, and I regret reposting, called the Secret Sun blog, and fuck that blog.
Oh shit, yeah. I remember that.
I reposted it, and like I had joined like their group, and so one day I was looking at Facebook, and like people were talking about Pizzagate in that group, and I thought it was stupid. I started looking into it, and I thought it was stupid, but then the Pizzagate conspiracy, which comes from a literal cyber attack from a fascist country, which is a true story.
Right, it's a Korean, right? Korean.
I know, it came from Russia. Like, it was the Russian.
Oh, Russia. Okay.
Yeah, it was doing Assange hack, and it was Hillary.
That's
Clinton.
how good I am with geopolitics.
Hillary Clinton's emails literally are what led to Pizzagate. And so there's a performance artist named Marina Abramovich.
Yeah, Abramovich. Yeah, so she's great.
And so I started looking at Pizzagate, and I thought Pizzagate was...
I like her art.
Yeah, no. She's... What's so crazy is she's, like, not controversial at all. Like, you know, this is crazy. I mean, like, she's done, like, a movie with Jay-Z and shit. And then when I looked her up, I realized I'd heard of her. Like, how many performance artists have I heard of? Like, she's, like, literally the only one, you know? And this is to right-wingers what's, like, controversial shit, right? So anyway...
The spirit cooking stuff and all that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she did some vaguely occult performance pieces. I mean, the vast majority of her stuff isn't occult at all, but she did some, you know?
I would equate it to like an Ari Aster film, like, you know, Midsummer, Hereditary. It's like she took elements of, you know, maybe some goetic principles and stuff, but, you know, made it her own in a performance piece. But like, that's not how she started. She was always controversial. She was always.
99% of her stuff has nothing to do with the occult. Like 99%.
Right. Yeah.
Like, she did like a couple performance pieces where she like had like, you know, pentagram and blood on her when she was naked, you know, and it's like, right. You know, and so then, you know, you're an evil occultist. So anyways, so I start looking at Pizzagate. I think it's too stupid, but then I realized that Marina Abramovich was playing a sold-out show in Seattle that night. So it was like on the day that I started looking into this, I'm like, so that's a weird synchronicity. I still wasn't going to write about this topic. Then later in the day, I realized that it was a cult day, which I still to this day don't even know what that is. But so it's a cult day, right? And so I'm like, okay, that's just weird. I'm looking at a Pizzagate on the same day that Marina Abramovich is doing a sold-out show in Seattle, and it happens to be a cult day. And so because of that, I wrote a piece debunking Pizzagate. And then a week after that piece was published, less than a week after that piece was published, the guy shot up comic ping pong. So it's like one of the situations, and again, all this, there's people trying to, you can go look, yeah, Marina Abramovich was in Seattle. She did a sold out show on what's called a cult day. I did publish that article. Like, I mean, I published it. That's one of those acts of acting on a synchronicity that when having it work out, you know, that was one of those things, like without that synchronicity, I wouldn't have written a piece about Pizzagate, and I did because of that. And then the guy shot out comic ping pong like a week later. But anyways, oh my God, the backlash to that fucking piece was horrifying.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
On a podcast where I didn't realize, like, I was being the voice of reason, and like everybody else on that podcast basically like thought Pizzagate was legit, and I was like the one guy that was getting like all the hate, being like, you people are dumber than shit. Like, this is obviously politically motivated bullshit. Like, you know, and yeah, and not only that, there was just such a disturbing element of judging people for the kind of art that they make, you know, and also, you know, also in a
that's really, that Nancy Reagan shit, yeah.
And also in a really just over the top stupid way, which still happens, because like, you know, it was like no one would ever say you're reading a horror book or you're into like goth music or you play a horror video game, and nobody's going to look at that and say, oh, you're secretly a Satanist. But if it's performance art or visual art, then you're a Satanist. Like that. I mean, it was that. Right. That it was like nobody would ever like look at somebody that you know. It's like this person reads a horror comic. Oh, you're a Satanist. And yet, if it's visual art or performance art and it's kind of dark and spooky, then all of a sudden you're a Satanist. You know, and like and there's just such a disturbing thing. And there was a lot of that going on. Like, oh, we could tell these people are into Satan because they played with this band who's like
I mean, the Satanic Panic, and we've said this for years, is back in full swing. It's you know, that
turned into QAnon. Yeah, it just kept getting worse from there. That's like it didn't get better. It just kept getting worse and worse. And like I said, this thing that I thought was sort of beneath me ended up being like, you know, like, well, maybe the universe pointing out to me how pertinent this was.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's dive deep, because I want to know how you are charging these synchronicities. Let's talk about praxis a bit, because you have also written these books. I remember when I first got to know you, and you were, you know, the editor for Disinfo, when we would talk on Facebook, you would post these like wonderful like meditations. I always remember, you know, Year of the Witch, right? And you would post these kind of like ganja-induced kind of psychonautic meditations. And like, how has that praxis evolved? Is that still something like? What are you doing now?
One of the things that I started doing when I started writing for Disinfo and my writing started getting more popular is, and it's like, I hate social media now, which is funny. But like, yeah, I mean, I was using social media and again, using tech. This is like what I do. And it was a new thing. And so I was creating like a live dream / synchronicity journal on and interactive. And the idea is that by doing that, you know, it works on the premises of like suggestion hypnosis, right? That then, you know, you're influencing other people's thoughts and possibly opening doors in their consciousness. And I still do it to this day. Yeah. I actually just posted something else. I have a new website called imaginalrealms.net. So it's still going on over there. I migrated over there and like, I haven't, that website's been up for like a year and I've really barely, because I was dealing with some health issues, I really haven't even started promoting it. I'm just like, I'm getting into that now, but it's all there. Yeah. So anyone who wants to read, if you're curious and you want to read that stuff, I never stopped posting it. I just released a book last year called Shine On You, Crazy Demon. But yeah, actually,
it's a great title.
Yeah. And it is literally a book about my ongoing communications with an ancient demon. So yeah, I mean, it's nonfiction, you know.
So are you,
to my knowledge, the only nonfiction book in existence about one man's. So I did a psychedelic ritual to build a connection with what I call the thousand-eyed God within, or the demon Enlil. And why did I do this? Because I was being told to do it. I don't fucking know. Like they were like some, you know, my subconscious life was continually telling me that I had some kind of connection to whatever.
Was it the synchronicity or the egg?
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I was like reading through my notes and like they kept telling me to like, you know, use your connection to this demon, you know, and so I did. And so I had an ongoing dialogue with it for years, and you could read all about it. I'll happily tell some stories on that front. But I do talk about synchronicities in that book too. And one thing I was kind of shown a very fascinating thing about synchronicities. And so this is what they want me to think about synchronicities. I always try, and like I do meditations and it's always in this light, right? So I had this vision about synchronicities years ago. And it was kind of like a hypnagogic dream. Like, you know, it was something communicating to me in the telepathic language of the astral plane. And what it showed me was and it's hilarious too, because I mean, this shit has a sense of humor. So like, in this vision, I wake up in the morning and I'm in my own apartment and I'm with my wife and I start singing this Tiffany song. Like I just wake up and I'm singing like Tiffany, right?
I think we're alone now.
I don't even know what she sings. I mean, it wasn't like one of her songs. And like, and my wife is just like, you know, rightfully so, like in the dream, like, why the fuck are you singing Tiffany? Like, shut the fuck up. And then we get up and we go to the store. And the second we walk into the store, that exact Tiffany song is playing. Like we walk in and that exact Tiffany song. And when that happens, my entire consciousness backs out to like another plane, and it kind of shows like the sound system in the store. And now it's like kind of, you know, it's like already cutscenes. That's the best way. I mean, the best way I can do it. It's like watching a TV show, except your consciousness is experiencing this. So it's like it pulls me out of my body in this dream. And it shows me then the kind of like the stereo in the store, right? And then it comes back and it just shows how all these things are connected. And it's basically saying you are the stereo in the store. You know, all of this is part of the same thing. That is why these synchronicities happen. Like there was a part of you is the song that was going to play Tiffany. Like you are actually the world around you. You know, it's all thought. It's, you know, it's all of mind. And so I focus on synchronicity and stuff like that. I'm trying. It's a really difficult concept to wrap your head around when you're in the physical world. But when that's usually what I'm thinking. I'm trying to think in those terms, like the world is me, which is why these synchronicities happen. You know, and by the way, I'd like to say, you know, remote viewing, which I've replicated myself, demonstrates exactly that. You know, it is basically a demonstration that all consciousness is in fact connected.
I was going to say, so you would delineate almost like transdimensionally that there's a separate astral thing. It's not just something like involuntarily visited, but it's something you can reach. And it's something that you could use to view, you know, this somatic shared place. Is that what you mean?
Well, what I mean is that you are, and this is what they've been trying to tell me for years. Like I'm on my computer, we're talking about, you know, the link between tech. Like I am the computer. There's a part of me that is this, that is you. I mean, basically what I'm saying is your consciousness is fixated so slimly in, it's fixated in such a fine point when you're a human and you're awake and in waking consciousness. And this is what they've been trying to tell me over and over again. It's just like, you are, you know, you are the computer, you are the technology, you're your guitar, you are all of those things. You are confined to a consciousness, but ultimately an unconscious part of you is, in fact, the entire world around you, and it's all made of thought. And, you know, again, just specifically, I'm probably not doing justice to like how they're showing it to me in the Tiffany example, but that's kind of it. Like, they're taking me out of it. You know, I've had a million visions. I was meditating, just doing transcendental meditation one morning, and I just kind of had the same thing about like the entire city of Seattle. Like, I stayed home from work that day, or I was working from home and I wasn't going to go to the office. And when I was transcendental meditating, it was just the same thing. It's just like, you are the car, you are the road, you know, but rather than telling you that, you're experiencing it, right? You know, it's like,
it's like what you're tethered to at that moment. Yeah.
And by the way, this is what things like remote viewing, which we've known about since the 70s, right? We're running away from these realities. Like, you know, it's that you know, thought does not arise from matter. Matter is comprised from thought. You know, that the soul does not live inside the body. The body resides inside the soul. You know, we want so desperately to believe that that's not accurate, and yet it absolutely is. You know, it's like, which is why things like magic work. And as time has gone on, like, the more I think that magic is kind of a bunch of nonsense, and really all it is just acknowledging that you aren't a person, that you are some kind of cosmic God entity, temporarily pretending to be a person. Now, the magic or sorcery part is acting like that, and that's a hard thing to do. And that's all the magic is. You're just acting like materialist philosophy is bullshit. You're acting like the shamanic philosophy, which has always been there. It's not like I came up with any of this stuff, you know. That it's like I have the same visions that mystics have been having for centuries, right? But you know, that's it. It's that it's all connected. Like, everything is thought. You aren't a person. You are some kind of cosmic God entity that is temporarily pretending to be a person, and you see that. You see that in your dreams. And if you really put effort into dream work, which I recommend to anybody, I mean, I have these experiences all the time. I was just talking about how you are the TV. One of the most common themes of my lucid dreams, and I've probably had like 4,000 lucid dreams at this point in my life. Like, I started having them regularly when I was, you know, like 18, and I'm 45, you know, and so like, I don't know, 2 or 3 a week. Like, I've rated up, it's like literally thousands. But one of the themes that I have is that that's it. It's like, I'm not a person. Like, I'm an entire environment. Like, I'll think about, oh, there's mountains over there, and there's mountains over there. I'll think about, I want a city there or whatever. And, you know, and then I can kind of explore these environments, but I am those environments. And I think that is metaphorical for what's going on in reality. But ultimately, I think we're living in a really, really back-assward realm where that knowledge, that basic knowledge of how consciousness works has been repressed intentionally, honestly. Like, that's sort of my thoughts. It's like, we live in bizarro world, you know? Yeah.
Would empathy, like, would empathy be a big quotient of consciousness, especially like human error? Would like mistake, like, is that not like internally human, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I think of, you know, going back to AI, and it's like, you know, these algorithms that are eradicating error, right?
Artists, these artists screwing algorithms, you know.
Right, and I think as artists, is like we just work with errors. That's our whole thing.
Absolutely, that's the human. Yeah, I mean, that's the human, and you're right. I like errors, and yeah, I mean, I think it's going to. You know, I was just having a conversation about this. Like, I did a lot of music writing, and I want to do some more. I haven't done a lot of music writing lately, and I used to do a decent amount. And it's kind of ridiculous to write about how music sounds in the year. Because, you know, anybody can, you know, that used to be part of when you're writing about music. You're writing about how the stuff sounds, you know. You're also, but now you can just like hit a button and it sounds, right? Like,
it's like, it's empathic or empathetic or whatever the fuck you want to, you know, everyone say. It's like your resonance with it. That's what a reviewer does, right? A good one anyway. It's like, this is where it brought me back. This is how, it's like a nostalgiamancy in some parts. It's a, you know, hauntological drift in others. It's
Yeah.
You know, it's like, music is it almost like opens the recesses of human error for me, and I like that in a weird way, if that makes sense.
There's something just eternal about music. I guess the point I was trying to make with music writing is, even though you can just hit a button and hear any music, any of these bands, so like, there's not as much of a need to describe the music. There's more of a need because there's so much shit out there for people to recommend stuff, right? Like, I'm almost like, it's almost even more vital. There is that human element that, like, I'm not going to like trust algorithms. I mean, sometimes algorithms do get it right. I don't listen to that much streaming, but like every now and again they'll get it right. But like, there's almost more of the need to be writers that like to tell, because there's so much shit out there. Like, there needs to be people to be like, hey, I have some, and it's up to you to find somebody who likes music that likes the same kind of music you do, because there's so much music out there. Well, I wouldn't just like random, like most of the time, a lot of times I read reviews about music, like I'm looking like that, this person really likes it, but like that doesn't sound like anything I'd be into, and I'll play it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of finding, like, I was writing about psychedelic music, like specifically, like the kind of music I'm writing about is like music that you're typically going to listen to when you baked, or
right.
Like, on mushrooms, like that. That's like that. So I mean, when I was writing about music, and be like, I'd even tell people, I'm like, if you don't like make psychedelic music, like, don't like send your music to me, because like I'm not, I'm not going to review your pop punk record. It's like, people love pop punk, man. I mean, it's like there's just such a diversity of consciousness out there,
Yeah, like I think that's where I'm at. Like I'm daring to be surprised, all the time. I think a lot of my interest too, just especially when it comes to music, and especially audiomancy, and the reason why I'm doing this with this Haunt Manual project is like, I'm like, every record was a score. It was a score, it was a journal for that time. And like, if you could see what I see in my mind of that time in a movie, that's the score of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thematic thing. Now, don't get me wrong, that's why a lot of people don't like it, right?
Well, I mean, I've always made a pretty. Psych rock is always a genre, I think one of my coworkers had a great comment on my band, like one of my kind of square like office coworkers, who's like, this is cool, Thad, but it's not like I'm on acid all the time, I'm like, yeah, and like that's kind of music I make, even though I don't. I mean, honestly, I think I was telling you this, but like I did psychedelics for the first time in 7 years, like over the summer. So it's not like I don't even do psychedelics very often anymore. It's like but that feeling is always there though. It's like I'm still trying to recreate. It's kind of interesting the way that works. It's like I know. So
now, yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
But yeah, I was gonna say. So now to like, kind of bridge more into that. Something I wanted to share with you, and I think we talked about it a little bit when we met in Seattle, was this project, and like how I'm using audiomancy kind of as like a nostalgic praxis to get back to a certain year. Funny enough, that year is 2017. Funny enough, that year was actually when I started writing for Disinfo.
Oh, crazy.
Funny enough, I'm back out of nowhere after doing these like, audiomantic rituals and writings and stuff and meditations, like exactly in the quadrants of where I was, staying at the house of where me and my, wonderful partner, she's listening, like met, and there's just a lot of like reverberations, and it's like time is linear in a sense. It's like we are just dogged in a sense of linear kind of transgression. So I can't go back in time, but it can put me, and I can conform things to put me back into a quadrant of where time was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I think music is a really good medium as far as nostalgia. I mean, as far as bringing you back,
or self nostalgia. That's the big differentiation is, what made that year so magnanimous, and then obviously finding out there was a lot of shitty parts too, of course. The tower card, it breeds as much as it burns, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really about the sentimentality of a memory of hearing something on the radio and where I was as a kid. It's more of like the music I was making at that time and cycling through and remembering, oh my God, all these unwritten songs that I had. Like I'm bridging synapses to forgotten music, And
that stuff that you lost in a translate somewhere and you kind of bring
exactly.
it back. Yeah. I swear to God, I heard this one electronic track I made in. God, I have some weird stories with that. In a psilocybin trance when I was like a teenager. I swear to God, I eventually made this song. It's like, I'm like, I was like, I heard this song and like, I didn't realize until I made it. I'm like, oh yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure this is like the song that I heard when I was tripping on mushrooms. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think sound in general, weirdly enough, everybody like focuses on like sigil magic and your typical like sigil design protocol, which I've largely rejected and only played around with in a minor effect. But I was essentially shown in no uncertain terms in like meditative states that like music and what's so funny about this is there's not even really a word for it, which is weird. Like when you think like there's not really a word for visualizing music, right? You're saying like visualize, but that's not what you're doing. You're like trying to hear music. You're trying to hear music.
It wouldn't be like synesthesia or something.
Synesthesia, I guess that's like a super word, but like when you visualize things, but like what's the word really for like trying to hear sound in your head, right?
Right, because like when I write music, it's not.
Word. Yeah, I don't know what that word is. Like I've been so like you're trying to essentially hear the music in your head, and weirdly enough,
but it is in graphs and paper and wavelengths. It's very visual.
Yeah, my like sigil practice largely is like I've been I'll write riffs and parts of music, and like it's more than I'm like trying to visualize a particular image or focus on it. I'm really trying to hear that stuff and turn myself into sound. And in meditative states, it was literally shown like one time. It's just like you keep using these visual elements, like these entities. God, I have these weird things that happen when I meditate where like these entities challenge me, and it's almost like kind of like battle sorcery, which, people talk about. But it's more like sort of, it's like they're training me, I think people would look at it like it's like some kind of a psychic attack or evil, and it's not really that in my situation. Like it feels like that, but then it's really like
they're inner demons knocking to be communed with. It's like, it's not like they're coming in hot just to fuck with you. It's like, no, listen to me. Like you got to figure this out. Yeah.
Well, more to the point, I mean, it's more like they're just training me. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like it's more like I wouldn't be using my psychic abilities, and I'm not, and I'm getting lazy with it. And sometimes they'll be like, hey, we're going to challenge you and like put you in this unpleasant state. And the whole point is like to actually do your magic, like do the shit that you're supposed to be doing, right? And I do. And one thing they should be very specifically is like you're using all these visualization exercises where really you should be doing sound more. Like you should be trying to hear sound and become like one with the sound. And they were totally right. When I started doing more of that, like and you're right. Sometimes for people that aren't as familiar with me, like I'm basically somebody who's crazy and sane at the same time. Like, I hear this is entirely true. There's always 100% of the time a weird array of psychedelic images going through my consciousness. Like that's just what it's like to be me. Is like there is always this constant stream of mutating art, and if I take psychedelics, it brings it to the forefront and I can kind of see it, but it's always there, whether I can choose to kind of focus in it or not. And it's kind of the same thing with like sound. Like if I put myself in a certain trance state, I'll just start hearing shit, what's interesting is, I studied psychology as a kid to see like, why, and I'm not the only one. There's a guy in Tacoma who like got hit in the head. Right. And he suddenly started seeing all kinds of weird fractal imagery through his brain. So like same thing, like this guy like always has like weird fractal art going through his head. And like, that's sort of the way my consciousness is. Like there's this always stream of weird psychedelic art going through my head. And I studied psychology, and psychology had no answers for that. But I realized a while ago that mysticism did give me some answers, and it's a pretty fucked up answer, whether you want to believe this or not. So what I was showed about why I have a constant stream of weird psychedelic art always going through my head is that there are different templates of bodies that souls can choose to incarnate into the human stream as, and some of those templates are customizable, and some of those customizable templates are kind of dangerous, and so it makes the human experience a little more difficult as far as the hard level, as far as passing. But yes, according to spiritualities, the reason I have a weird psychedelic stream of psychedelic art going through my head is because there are customizable templates that you can incarnate into human existence as. And I have one of those weird customizable templates where they tweaked it so there's all this psychedelic art going through it all the time. And oh, by the way, like there was a vision that went along with this. This was like shown to me, like, oh, like it's almost like an AR glasses thing where you put the AR on and there's all these like weird, in this word, it's like this weird, like black and white, like very particular kind of art, you know. It was sort of like, oh yeah, when you're incarnating it into a human form, like you can, there's certain like weird tweaks you can, like, you know, like almost AR, like you got one of the ones where you have like weirds. So, you know, so psychology has no answers for that kind of thing.
Well, it's also your filter, right? It's like what you can fathom. So you're gonna filter it the way you see it, like what you've been presupposed to see. And I feel it's the same. And like, you know, to circle back to, you know, your old kind of you know, psychonautic kind of meditation journals. I actually started the haunt manual with the meditation journal because I've been keeping them, but it's funny because I often think about yours and I'm like, oh yeah, this is good to just be like absolutely within. It's like writing from somewhere else where it's very like matter of fact, but it's completely like devoid of any kind of somatic identity, you know. It's just completely off the wall. Yeah.
I just finished the trilogy of books last year that you can check out, and it's the only trilogy of books that I'd actually, if you're not familiar with me, I'd recommend reading them in reverse order, because like just because they're better, like the last one's the best one, and even though it's in sequence, it doesn't really matter. Like I literally read like the third one, then the second one, then the first, because the first one is the worst, and that's a weird synchronicity too, because like I accidentally, like, I was trying to make kind of like a nonfiction Invisibles. Like, that's sort of what I was trying to do with this book. Was like, what if Invisibles was like nonfiction? Like, rather than Grant Morrison, like, fictionalized.
Oh, okay.
It's weird. Yeah. So, like, what if he just wrote about what was actually going on with magic? So that's sort of like what I did. And I accidentally released it like a week, the first book. And this got delayed for like a year because of like shitty editors that I was working with. And so I accidentally released it like on like I think a week away from like the 20th anniversary of when the Invisibles dropped.
Funny.
Yeah, it's just another weird like synchronous thing. And just like the Invisibles, like it's not really that good at first. like it gets better and better.
Yeah. I mean, it gets great.
Something you tell about the Invisibles, like the entire first book of the Invisibles is like okay, it's not like great. And then
like huffing, algae in the sewer.
Oh yeah. What is that? Like, I remember reading that, and so my book also accidentally mirrors the Invisible in that way. My trilogy of books, and that like it starts off kind of meh, and then it just keeps getting better. Right.
So in reverse, I like that. So like you working within a nonlinear construct too.
Yeah, and I think I mean so much of the predecessor that led to this, with these books existing, were alien entities showing me up and explaining that they exist outside of time, and showing me this model of the Holy Trinity, where it's there's the father or mother that is the part of you that exists outside of time, and then there's you, who is the person talking to you right now, who is the son or daughter, and then there's the Holy Spirit, which is and it took me outside of time, and it showed me this thing, and it was all connected, and it's basically exactly what I've been talking about, like the interconnectivity of all of human time. Like time is like a singular object, right? It's like it just looks like a video game or a book or something, right? From their perspective, like it's one thing. It's happening in linear fashion. And two,
and so they can flip to their own pages. They can skip levels. Yeah.
Well, and what I'm talking about, there's such easy explanations. Like, I know it's so hard for people to wrap around, like the idea, like what I was talking about earlier, that like you are, the computer, you are your guitar. Like you, in fact, are everything a part of you is. But when you think about it as something like, a video game or something like, I mean, the character in the video game is technically kind of sort of like part of the entire video game, right? It's like, and you could port it into 1, or you could port into level 5, which would be 1975. You could port into, wherever. And, video games are just a metaphor for that in the first place. And so this sounds like a crazy thing, but I mean, this is essentially what they're showing you. It's like one entity. Not only that, but it's all connected. And like this other force, the Holy Spirit, is the force that is connecting all of it. And like that vision plays in a lot of what am I doing my magic too. I was talking about like trying to think of anything, but I mean, I think, I like to say that, all consciousness is interconnected, which is why magic works. And magic works because all consciousness is interconnected. Like that's the nature of it is so. And this is what they showed me, that, there's whatever you want to call the Holy Spirit. And I honestly think, what we want to call the Holy Spirit is in a way like what a lot of people call demons or demonic, honestly.
Like, right. Yeah.
It's like black. It's like there's this dark kind of lower
non-denominational.
It's holding everything together. And it's that order that comes across as like evil and demonic,
So what are some things that you think take you away from that membrane, that tether, that what you term as the Holy Ghost? Like what are the things that, because I feel it's at points in my life, and I feel like even still a lonerism that is hard to get past.
Well, I mean, here I am talking to you about this kind of stuff, right? And like,
right.
When I hung out with you, it's like, I write about this stuff on my blog, and like I wrote about it in front of thousands of people for Disinfo for years, but like, I don't really. This is the first time I talked about it in like months, like it's not something I actually, it's like, again, there's this, it's all about identifying that you aren't a person, that you are some kind of cosmic God entity that's pretending to be a person, right? And that part of me is always, pretending to be a person. Like that person's like there, and that's most of my life, man. That takes you into the world. And you're right. It's like I'm like a sports fan, and and people wouldn't think about me, but like, I mean, the reason I like it though is it's kind of grounding and it makes me feel like normal. But you're right. I mean, most of my life, I go to work. Like I said, I just went to like a dinner party last week, and like I'm never going to say anything about any of this stuff. I don't talk about it with family, like friends, and then I go out and talk about it on the internet in front of like.
It feels like there's a secret language that like I can't translate, or I'm just I feel alienated for reading. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel more alienated than anybody because I'm a legitimate freak. I mean, I am. There's not many people that are crazy insane, and that was one of the most baffling things on Disinfo. Right? Is like I'm writing about this stuff. Like summoning entities that are coming down and showing me visions of and keeping a live dream journal and flying around the astral plane and talking to all these entities. And I was like, I just like assumed there was other people doing that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what gave you the confidence?
Just like
what gave you the confidence to decide that that's what it was? I think a lot. I still, all have experiences, but I still struggle, like, skepticism and stuff. Like, what gave you the confidence to be like, no, this is outside of me, or is it? Is it outside of you?
That's the funny thing about that is I don't. Death, I guess. The actual answer to that question would be an entity. How have you ever ran into like what people would call the Grim Reaper? Or like have you ever had that you've experienced like a death entity, right? Have you?
I don't know if I would consider it death entity, but yeah, I've definitely had,
So I'd always
outside what I would consider outside my brain chemistry, like communion with another, right? But I'm forever struggling with like, well, how much is that as me? Am I like thinking about it too much? Am I struggling with it? Like, you know what I mean? It's an ongoing investigation. I'll put it that
impossible. And you asked me how I did it. The question is, I didn't. Whatever entity you want to call death did. I mean, I'll be happily tell that story because it's a weird one. So, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's like my wife says this too. I mean, she has kind of vague psychic abilities, and she says that she's kind of encountered the kind of death entity before, like literally like the Grim Reaper shit. That there is this entity that sort of like guides humans through the death process. But anyways,
like the river Styx.
Yeah, I was at a point in my life. Yeah, sort of like that. So I was at a point in my life where I was basically like drinking myself to death, and what's so funny is in retrospect, I realized that I had an autoimmune disease, which is part of why I was so fucked up, right? By the way, that's all resolved. I remember I could chat with you guys. It's not really that interesting to talk about, but like I actually after a year and a half of feeling like shit, I'm finally like feeling good again. So hopefully people will see more of me. But anyways,
yeah,
so I was at a really low point in my life. And when I was drinking way too much and just, I mean, I was just had nothing going on. Had been unemployed for a while, and I was just basically like drinking myself way too much, which I shouldn't have been doing because I had an autoimmune disease and my body couldn't really process alcohol properly, which is, I basically partied with like one hand tied behind my back for years, which is amazing.
Right.
But anyways, so and one day I was just taking a nap in my room, and some black robed entity showed up. And it clapped its hands like a hypnotist wakes up a subject, like wake up. And there was something in my room that day. I was kind of like in hypnagogic state, and it was just like clap, clap, wake up. And I did, and something just like I guess when you're hypnotized, like something snapped within me, and I woke up, and I realized that I had psychic abilities, and that part of the reason things were so bad in my life was because I was in denial about that. I guess like a gay guy being in the closet, or a gay person sometimes we got.
Sure, yeah. Or the witch's closet, or the broom closet.
Which I still am. When I go home and go and hang out with like most of my friends and family, am I talking about any of this stuff? Like, I'm like this weird publicly out of the closet, and yet in my regular life, like,
yeah,
it's too weird. People can't deal with it. And so yeah, something snapped, and like that doubt that you have, it was like, well, two things. It was like, part of the reason things are so bad in your life is because you're in denial about this stuff, and it was sort of telling me that like, look, this is an advantage. Like you shouldn't be like ashamed of this. You should be like proud of this and like use this to your advantage. Like you're looking at this as a curse, and it's really a blessing. And not only that, you have to start practicing magic, which I did like the next day. So yeah, something, whatever you want to call death, the Grim Reaper, some kind of entity showed up. And on that front, I was later told that I basically would have died if that wasn't happening. Like I in no uncertain terms, like, yeah, I mean, if we wouldn't have done that, you would have died. So when I say that death did that, I mean, and I think it's very probable that I would have, done something very drunk and stupid at that point in my life. And also, what was funny, though, is when I was sort of told that I would have died if that didn't happen, they were just like, oh, it doesn't. I mean, there's multiple versions of you. We figured one of them was going to die. Like, basically like you would have died. Like, we saved you from death. You were going to die, and we fixed that. But it wouldn't have been.
So wait, did they just admit to you the multiverse? Is that what happened?
Yeah, because that's another story. Because the multiverse has become this big thing, and not only that, like Doctor Strange.
It's hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. Everyone's been talking about this in these circles forever, and especially like comic books really had a hand in that. Like really did, and it's so funny to see it like make almost $1 billion like as a concept, like every movie.
It's unbelievably trippy to me because some people are abducted by aliens. And when I was in my early 20s, and this is playing around with Robert Monroe's techniques for astral projection, I was abducted by multiple versions of me. And not only that, when I was talking about something about aliens, when this alien come on and taught me about, the Holy Trinity, yeah, that was me too. It showed up as me. It didn't show up as aliens. It showed up, and it showed up in a version of me that I had been visualizing too, which is even weirder. I've been doing this magic exercise, like envisioning kind of just like a me that had more to go together. But so to get on the being abducted by multiple versions of me is so Robert Monroe.
It's exactly like the intro I just talked about, or at least in this meditation I talked about, where I saw. It was a Sephiroth meditation. And I saw, 5 silhouettes like darkly mattered, silhouettes of myself with varying degrees of brightness in like galaxies and stars within them. And I noticed that it was like 2017 was the 5th year. That was it, the 5th ghost. And like they kind of came into each other. But yeah, that was like a interesting meditation on the multiverse, or of like even of just like the the self of yesteryear. It's like a body hopping in a different time. It's I don't know.
You've seen it too. So anyways, with Robert Monroe's techniques for mass action, you sort of put yourself in a sleep paralysis state, and then try and roll out of the sleep paralysis state. Well, I wasn't very good at rolling out of the sleep paralysis state, but one thing that Monroe suggests is if you are having trouble rolling out of the sleep paralysis state, to try to if you can get your hands out, to ask for help, right? And I did this total of one time. I tried this multiple times, but so the only reason I mention any of that is because like this isn't like, I'm talking about being abducted into a multiverse of me, right? And this happened in the early 2000s, like I would say maybe 2000, 2001, before any of these movies or anything. If you think it's like power of suggestion, you're like, no, like this is way before. This is why I'm talking about this, because it happened like way before this. So anyways, I got my arm out and I asked for help, as Monroe suggests. Again, not my idea. It's like, if you can get your arm out of your body, ask for help. See if it can pull you out of your body. I was, in fact, something grabbed my hand and pulled me out of my body. And the next thing I knew, I was in this kind of like psychic sky temple, was the best way I can explain it. I mean, it was just like gorgeous psychic architecture that was almost like somewhat like an MC Escher kind of thing. Like it didn't make sense like in a traditional way, and yet somehow I knew how to navigate it. Like it was this labyrinthine, bizarre thing that like seemingly would make no sense, and yet I somehow knew exactly like, oh, well, I know how this works. And so I go through this thing, and I came up to this corridor. And who did I encounter in this corridor other than like multiple versions of me? And it wasn't like thousands or anything. I would say like, I don't know, like 20, like 15 or 20 different versions of me. And I had a conversation with myself, and I asked, there's still some things that it told me that I'm not entirely comfortable with. We're like talking about. I've still never actually said everything that these entities told me, but I can tell you most of it. One thing that they told me, I mean, they taught me. I mean, I ended up becoming a writer after this. I wasn't really writing that much, but one thing they did show me was like I kind of questioned human language, and because I was sort of like, what is human language in comparison to all of this? And they kind of just like showed me, like one of them was like, oh, I built all this with human language, and it showed me like all this, like this entire kind of like town and countryside of like of this like psychic, astral plane architecture that it created, and so that was pretty fascinating. And so I mean, I still think about that to this day though, because you do think about like how the architecture of your mind is built on language, and from a conscious experience, our language is kind of like shaping the way that we perceive the world and everything. And that's kind of what it was showing me. It's just like, no, language is actually pretty interesting. And like when I build all the stuff on the astral plane with language.
Very constrictive. Yeah.
It's very constrictive, but like with the entity.
And linear.
Yeah,
absurdly linear.
Yeah. But also this entity is sort of like, but it's actually kind of like the foundation of, how like this, I actually build psychic architecture. The other thing that was pretty fascinating in that experience is like what I wanted from these entities is I wanted psychic abilities, and they didn't get it. Like the response to that was like, I wanted like evidence of psi phenomena, right? And they did not understand this. They were like, why would you?
Is this not evidence enough?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, I would go more to the point that, like, in retrospect, I really think it's like, we live in back Asswardville. Like, it's like most parts of the multiverse, like, magic is the way things are, right? There's not this ignorance that comes from fundamentalist materialism, and I think that's the way it's supposed to be. So they were just like confused, but then they kind of showed me how to do it. Like they showed me how to like meditate, and what I later became like my meditative state. And then it also showed me some kind of intermediary realm, like where like people train to incarnate into humans. It was like sort of like, this is like this warehouse where before human beings incarnate and to become humans, like they familiarize themselves with certain aspects of this reality. So I mean, and then years later, there's this multiverse and stuff, and it touches on another point. I had a vision about a year ago where I was kind of looking at almost like a map of kind of like a crude video game from above. And there was all these entities, like, or these little kind of people, that like crudely animated people. And there were certain ones that I could tell had like a different levels, right? And there was like, so this person was like at a level 2, a level 3, a level 7 or whatever. And, you know, this person at a level 8. And what the entity like took over my consciousness and sort of said, we are really trying to communicate with those people, like, because those people will take the ideas that we give them and then put them into reality. And then it went through this other kind of whole thing and talking about writers. Then it was further explained, like it was like all these vignettes of all these different writers who are, so according to them, like there's a spirit realm that's looking to us and they are like communicating with writers. And that's what I find so fascinating about the multiverse thing. You know, it's like people have been writing this in Marvel Comics. So like I experienced this thing of the multiverse, but you know, there's the same entities that are like, you know, communicating with me or in that side seem to have been communicating with all kinds of other writers and implanting these ideas into our stories that have now become amazingly mainstream. So if you want to see something, I've been a Marvel fan for years, and what I've always said is like, man, there's a lot of crazy fucking weird mysticism in Marvel stuff, and they're finally
and DC.
They're finally starting to get into that stuff, you know, and it's crazy. And like, you know, it's only good. Like, again, just like the writing and stuff I do, you know, I can't say it's bad, but yeah, the entire concept of the multiverse, there's a part of me that wants me to believe that I exist in like, I don't know. Like I said, and that's what's so great. It wasn't like thousands of me. I don't know. There's like 15 or 20 of me. You know, it's like,
even just to quantify a number, like, is crazy. Just another is enough.
The idea that on some level, I am some kind of multi-dimensional entity that exists in like 12 different Earth-like realities, I guess, vaguely Earth-like realities. So, and yeah, as I was mentioning too, and if one of them, if death hadn't have saved one of them, it wouldn't have been that big a deal because we just that was the thought. We always just assumed one of those was gonna die. So.
But I love this. You have a language. I feel like you're very there's a sinew there with you about it, and I think it's very, you know, confidence. The first word. It's probably not the right word, but like I have a hard, like you speak in how I feel like there's some definitive kind of answer for who you're talking to, and I just wonder. Like that surprises me as somebody, you know, that has had experiences, but I'm still like on the fence. I've never had anything as definitively shown me, or maybe I'm not listening well enough. You know, it's like I don't know. Like it's just it's very interesting to me. I love that it's not absolute. You're not being absolutist, but you're being like very definitive as to like who the characters are that you're, you know, talking with.
I mean, in my world, and this is something, so when I was talking about that entity that clapped and woke me up, right, and was like, you have to, and the other thing about this is my life did turn around pretty much immediately after this. I started practicing magic, and I was at this low point of my life, and it like immediately turned around. I met the woman who would be my wife. I completely changed careers. And
so, like, my 2017.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, that was your 2017. It was my 2006, basically. Like the second this happened, and like I started practicing magic and doing this, like things turned around pretty much instantly, and my life got way better. It would have been nice if they would have, like, you know, helped with the autoimmune disease, which they didn't. Years later. Thanks, guys. But anything. Yeah, I mean, so I've had this dream multiple times, and I'm going to put together a presentation. I can like show you like what this presentation is going to be eventually. Like, so I had this dream like 4 or 5 times, and it's a lucid dream, right? Like I said, I've had like thousands of lucid dreams in my life at this point, and so I had this recurring one for a while. And in this lucid dream, I wake up and I go lucid, so I now know that I'm dreaming, right? And so I go around and I try and tell the other dream characters, like, hey, look, you're dreaming. I'm gonna, and you know, and they don't believe me. And I'm like, no, seriously, you're dreaming. Like, watch, I'm gonna go fly around. I'm gonna go put my hand through the wall. Like, if we weren't dreaming, I wouldn't be able to do this, right? And so but they still don't believe me, right? They're still like, nah, even though you're flying around the room and you're putting your hand through walls, like, I don't know if that's what that means. And it eventually told like I finally like got what this dream was trying to tell me. And it's basically like I realized like when that thing snapped its fingers, I essentially went lucid. And there are people like me that are lucid in this dream that you call reality that know that they're dreaming. So we're talking about this confident, and like it took me years to like put this together. I mean, but that's basically what it is. And I like, again, how do you do it? I don't know. I mean, you got to try. And like, I mean, you're delving in it, you know, like you're you're doing your magic. I mean, that's all I'm saying. Like, really, all I think any magic is, I don't even really think how you do it is necessarily that important, but it's really like trying to establish that dialogue with the higher side of yourself, like listening to your inner voice, listening to your inner world,
the super self.
Yeah, trying to communicate with that side of self. But, then there are people like me that are just like, yeah, no, like, I know that I'm dreaming. And like, I find myself in a state multiple times a week now where it's like this hypnagogic state where I'm like, yeah, exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not really a human, like outside my body. I'm kind of like floating behind my head. And like, I'm just this kind of like weird energetic being in this liminal state. And in that state, I know it's like, oh yeah, I mean, like, I'm not that person. But like, how to do that? I mean, yeah, something did it for me, but I also put a lot of effort into it too. But on the front of like trying to do things, like I was saying, like synchronicities, like and stuff like, and I mean, we're talking about creating my dream journal. Like my dreams are predicted the future a bunch of times now. Fact. Like I was posting this stuff publicly, like so like the and that's the metaphor of this lucid dream that I'm talking about. So there's like me trying to put through my flying around and putting through my hand through walls, and like I'm doing that shit. Like
in the actual practice,
I asked these beings for psychic abilities, and they did it. It's like nobody really acknowledges it to somebody. It's one of these things. I saw there was a guy that did this. Like maybe I need to get home. Like I hate paranormal television or something like that. They're like, no, it's like I got the fucking receipts. Like I kept a dream journal. My dreams predicted the future a bunch of times. You know what a crazy example of that? In December of 2015, I had a dream or a vision. And it's like I was meditating and I was in this kind of liminal state. And I had this vision where I was talking. All of a sudden, I was kind of in the presence of whatever you would want to call your holy guardian angel, right? And it's just kind of like this ball of white light. And it caught me really off guard. And I was sort of like, fuck, like I wasn't expecting this, and like, what do you ask? Like it's not like I had prepared material, right? It's like you're bumping into like some celebrity or artist that you're a fan of in the elevator, and it's like
you ask mustard or ketchup, and if they answer ketchup, you exercise them.
Exactly. If you worked in the same building of this person, you might be prepared to like run into them and have something to say, but like it was just like I don't know what to say to this person, and so. What the entity told me was like, what you should be asking is what you can do to help. And I was like, okay, like what can I do to help? And the answer was write more about politics. And again, December 2015, this made no fucking sense to me. I'm like, politics? Write more about politics? Like what the fuck?
Right on the eve. Yeah.
Less than a year later, and for another year, my political writing was the most popular thing that I did by a long shot, which I wasn't happy about. And this is all documented. Like a year before my political writing became most popular, I had this vision where, and again, this is before Trump got elected. Before I even say that in the vision. I'm like, you want me to like write about how I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter? Like,
right.
like I didn't even get it at the time. Like I'm like, what do you want me to say about politics exactly? And then a year later, I got it, and that's just one. There's many examples. Oh man, synchronicities. Like if anybody's curious, go look at my blog, Imaginal Realms, right now. Like there are so many fucking weird synchronicities that I have proof of now that like, I mean, like you can't say this didn't happen. And so
I'll put it in the chat. What's it called? It's Unnatural Realms.
So imaginalrealms.net.
Imaginal Realms.
Imaginalrealms.net.
I should put that in the.
Yeah, and so it's like a lot of this stuff, but there's also this thing where it's like I realize that I'm going to spend the rest of my life like that guy in the lucid dream. It doesn't matter how many times I fly around or put my hand through walls. Most people are still going to be stuck in that, and like they're going to be like, no. It's like even it's like wait.
Yeah, I get you.
Like I'm not, because you're right. It's hard. You get locked into fundamental. People are very social creatures, and fundamentalist materialism is a very, very popular spiritual philosophy. I would say more popular than Christianity or more popular than religion. And weirdly enough, our religions are essentially materialist religions when you get down to it. I mean, the entire philosophy the whole point of spirituality is that women are baby factories. Like that's a materialist spiritual philosophy. Like that's not
a productionist. Yeah.
I write about flying around the astral plane and, like communicating with entities and in various trance states. Like that's, our spirituality has nothing to do with that. And
I love that.
Both our scientific community and the religious community both hate that shit.
I love that, and I really do love. This is something I'm working towards. Is I've had many communions with different things. I don't know if they're just projections or if they're actually the other. But at the same time, I love hearing folks like yourself that are just like, no, I'm taking this as a message. Like, what the fuck does this mean? Well, and like being a synchronicity fucking correspondent, that's a big deal.
I kind of did. Yeah, no, man. Let me talk about a couple of synchronicities, because like there's a couple. I mean, I write about a lot of them, and I recommend anybody to go check out the website and just look at it. I'm gonna start promoting this website soon now that I'm finally actually feeling better. Yeah, for those who don't know, I was like, my health was pretty bad for like the last year and a half, so I've been kind of out of it. But like, yeah, I'm insanely lucky. Like I somehow found a way out of that, which is crazy. So anyways, I had the synchronicity happen in February 2021, and this is all provable, right? Like there's a trail on this. So one of my fans emailed me. She read my book, and she said that she had a dream, and it was a dream about this man who had snake-like arms. And she messaged me to ask me what I thought this meant. And, sometimes my wife tells me this too. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm like, dreams are very subjective. Like, I think I'm probably as good at dream interpretation as like most people alive. And yet, I don't know. Like, sometimes it's random. Sometimes it's humorous. So anyways, she asked me like about this. Like, what do you think that means? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Oswald, I will.
Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt your flow with this, but I wanted.
Good. I will absolutely talk about Russian. Like, I have direct ties to Russian disinformation specifically, so I will.
Oswald commented this a while ago, and I didn't know exactly what he was mentioning, but I just want to put that up there.
Let me finish my take. A little time, because this one is pretty baffling. And so, okay, actually, let me start over. So this involves two fans. So one of my fans messages me and says that there's this guy he knows that moved to Seattle, and like he recommends a friend request. I friend him. So this is a Friday morning. I look at this guy, and the first post of his that comes up in my feed, and I'd message him to be like, oh, hey, I'm his friend or whatever. I sent you a request, whatever. So the first thing that comes up in my feed is this album that he just released on his label called Eschatology. It's sold out. Like the first post of his that comes out of my feed. Now, what's synchronous about that?
Well, Eschatology, Revelation, and all that.
I've put out an album called Eschatology. I was in a band.
Oh, you did?
An album called Eschatology. So, like, how many albums called Eschatology are there? And how many times do like people become friends, and then the first post is like about this album? Like the odds of me even seeing that post were like 0. So that was pretty synchronous. And again, all provable. Like, I got screenshots of this. Like, you can say, like, here I am friending the guy. The first post that showed up in my feed was about this album called Eschatology, and I just so happened to be in a band that released an album called Eschatology. Like, that's pretty weird synchronicity. So that's one. Again, the paper trail on all of it. And then the second one is this girl, a fan of mine, who plays in a great shoegaze band in LA, emailed me about this dream with, she would read my book, and she had a dream with this guy that had snake-like arms. And so after I'm looking at Facebook, and after I see this guy's post about eschatology, I'm reading my messages, and I'm like, and then she says she was using kind of my book as my old book as kind of a divination right. So she was like pulling it up and opening random pages, and she did that to my old book.
Audiomancy?
Yeah. And I mentioned, she opened to the page where I mentioned the Seattle band These Arms Are Snakes, and it was like, again, I didn't know what this meant, but then she does this thing, and then she pulls open the page with the These Arms Are Snakes reference. So because of that, I sit there and I think, These Arms Are Snakes. Like, I hadn't thought about that band. Like, and that guitar player in that band's in another band called Dust Moth, and I wonder, what has Dust Moth been up to? And so I look it up. As it turns out, the band Dust Moth had released their first album in 5 years on the day that I had read this email from this girl about These Arms Are Snakes, where this other guy also emailed me, like, a friend of me, and had talked about eschatology, right? So, like, both of those happened on the same day, all provable. Like, I have the receipts on all that. Yeah, here's her messaging me this. This is this band. I looked up the band Dust Moth. They released their first album in 5 years on the exact day I was thinking about this band. Again, all provable. So Yeah. So I'm gonna tell one other one because this is one of my favorite like synchronicity stories because it's so weird. So I had this dream. I think it was probably 2020 or 2019, I guess. I had this, or like maybe fall, like six. So I had this dream that I was in a CD store, right? And which is something that I never do. Like it's the year, it's like I don't go to CD stores anymore, right? I don't know how often you do, right? So I had a dream I was in the CD store.
Not often.
Yeah, exactly. And so I saw this CD from my childhood, and it was like the CD had been completely eliminated from my mind, right? Like I just for some reason was like, oh, that is something that had completely, I don't remember it. And so in the dream, there was this like kind of like nostalgia like dream, like, oh, holy shit, okay. So then about 6 months later, my friend's doing a comedy show in Seattle. And so I have some time to kill between going to work and going to the show. It made no sense for me to go all the way home and come back where it is. And so I stop in a CD store. Like I just had time to kill. I ate dinner and I'm like, oh, there is like a CD store that has like old DVDs and like there's a couple old albums I was going to look at. So nothing I planned on doing. So I'm sitting there and the exact same thing that happens in the dream happened. Like it's like I'm sitting there and there's this album called Lucy's Fur Coat, right? And it's like this is an album that I had when I was in high school, like by this band from San Diego. Again, complete. So the exact experience in the dream I have, right? And I'm sitting there and it's like, holy shit, yeah, this deja vu experience where like this exact thing that happened in a dream happened. And so I didn't even buy the CD because I didn't remember if it was really. I didn't remember anything about what it sounded like, but I totally remember that I had it. So that night when I went home. I went to my friend's comedy show and then I went home and I pulled up the album. It wasn't actually, I think, till the next night that I pulled up the album. And I'm sitting there listening to Lucy's Fur Coat, Jaundice, the album. And it's about when I'm halfway realizing that I realize the album, this came out on a major label and the label had just posted it on YouTube less than a week. This is like a 25-year-old album. The exact album that I had a dream about finding in a CD store, this mystery album. I did have that experience when I found it in an album. Then when I looked up in the album online, the label had just posted it on YouTube a week before I had looked it up, and I was the first one that was listening to it. Literally, number one going through this album that I just have. And also, the beauty of the synchronicity too is, and again, there's receipts and all of that. You can actually see that I went to a CD store. My friend had a comedy show. I have screenshots of me being the first person. You can see when this album was posted. You can see that I bought the album a few days later. And the other beauty of this one, July 23rd. That Friends comedy show, that all happened on July 23rd, which is, of course, the Robert Anton Wilson. Yes, totally true. I did not realize that. And again, it was July 23rd. My friend had a comedy show. I went to a CD store. I had this mystery. I can't prove the dream part, the dream amnesia, but all the rest of it, it's like, yeah. I went home and I looked up this album, and somehow the label had just put that album on the internet less than a week before. And I was the first one that ever was played.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, awesome, crazy. Anyways, Russian disinfo.
Yeah. Let me put that back up, and then we'll end with that. What was Oswald's? It was Russian disinfo. Where is it here? It was a good question. That was really deep. And cause some issues.
This is caused.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Talk about disinformation as a Russian meddling pandemic. Well. I have, unfortunately, and I guess Keats does as well, through disinfo.com, a direct tie to literal Russian propaganda. Disinfo, when I first started writing there in 2023, there's a woman named Abby Martin who, when I was running the site, I know
Abby Martin. Yeah.
So I later realized that she had
RT.
Yeah, she had posted more on which no longer exists when Russia raided the UK and it got officially shut down. Disinfo.com, I don't know all the details, but Abby had posted more on Disinfo than anywhere else. And then there's also a guy named Lee Camp who was also posting on Disinfo. So when I first started writing for Disinfo, Abby Martin and Lee Camp, it was kind of like Abby Martin, Lee Camp, and me.
Oh, yeah, Lee Camp too, I know. Yeah, holy shit. I didn't realize that Abby posted so much on Disinfo.
I didn't realize too until I read it. Like apparently she had posted more than like any other contributor on that site.
Holy shit.
And so I don't know.
Oh my God, were we unwitting Russian agents?
In a way, yes. Well, it's like I have direct ties, and it's a story I'll probably tell for the rest of my life. So, anyways,
at least it's called Disinfo.
Exactly.
Well, that's what you get. Yeah.
So if you tuned in to disinfo in 2013, when it was at kind of the height, and it was getting millions of hits a month. I mean, probably in an average week, you'd be seeing posts from me, Abby, and Lee. And I think Abby had already had her RT show at some point, and then Lee came. So I literally think like RT television was like watching disinfo and poaching talent. I don't entirely know what was going on, but like two people that were contributors to RT or to disinfo ended up getting TV shows on RT. And so I had a social media feed with, tons of fans of Russian propaganda. And it's kind of interesting story because like they're really clever. Like it's progressive propaganda. If you watch Abby Martin or Lee Camp, I probably agree with like 90% of what they're saying.
She's not the worst. Like she's got great insight with
but
things,
but it's the other 10%, and that's
right.
The thing. And you have to, and I will say I was completely baffled. Like I was bamboozled by it because I would watch like Abby Martin's show, Breaking the Set, and I didn't get it. Like I thought it was shady. I'm like, why is Russia funding like Noam Chomsky interviews and shit? Like why are they funding like lefty media? Like I thought it was shady. I was suspicious of it, but I didn't get it entirely. Like why they were doing this. And yeah, I mean, like I'm directly associated with the stuff essentially. And so then it wasn't until 2016 where it became obvious, like the entire point to them funding this stuff, and you can go read about, I mean, it's not like me speculating on this. It's like the entire point was to divide the left to help prop up the right, which actually seemingly worked. It was basically trying to turn Bernie bros against mainstream Democrats. And so to split.
To be fair, mainstream Democrats kind of did it to themselves.
They did. But Russia is a straight up. Russia is an unquestionably straight up fascist country that is trying to spread fascism worldwide. That's a fact.
Right. Yeah.
So I was always like, why were they funding this stuff? In the play was pretty. I mean, it's the both parties are just as bad. Like if both parties are just as bad, then fascism is just as bad as what we have right now.
I wouldn't say both parties are just as bad, but I definitely feel the frustration.
But that was the point. And Russia's very clever. Americans are stupid, and we're used to our propaganda being like dumbass fucking Fox News shit. And so, like, actually, like making like good like progressive journalism that's like talking about corporations and doing news that other news outlets weren't do. But it was just as manipulative. And unfortunately, I saw it work. And like for years, like people would still question me. Like I try to explain it's like, if Fox News was funding this, wouldn't you be a little skeptical of it? So, since it's foreign fascists, and it was like definitely, no, RT is funded right from the Kremlin. Like it's straight up fascist propaganda. Like there's no denying. Like that shit is propaganda. It was a campaign to prop up fascism. Half of it had to do with Julian Assange. That's why they hacked the Democratic Party. Again, I always found it shady. It wasn't until 2016.
The DNC, yeah.
It wasn't until 2016 that I finally was like, oh, I see what they're doing. Like, the whole point was to divide the American left, which worked because Trump did end up getting an
and also like firebombing Bernie twice.
Firebombing Bernie twice. Yeah.
That was pretty obvious.
I'm a Bernie fan too, but like in the last election, like
I mean, he was kind of the best of the lot, but I'm just not a fan of any of it.
I don't like it either. There's a reason I didn't write about politics for years, but like it's bad. It's bad. Like it's straight up fascist propaganda. Like when the Ukraine war started, they straight up shut down RT America. Like all those people lost their job. Chris Hedges wrote that for years, and like man, I'd see Chris Hedges quotes in my feed. It was just straight up. It was just straight up Russian propaganda. Like that guy did journalism, but they were also doing straight up Russian propaganda. Julian Assange is a hero. It's like Julian Assange is a right winger who said he was a right winger in 2013, and then he did everything he could to get Trump elected. That was, and he worked for RT, by the way, too. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty calculated campaign. Like, I mean, I got to watch it firsthand, and it worked. It's like it's sad, but it worked. Like they wanted to.
I also feel that, like, I guess if it's targeted that way, but and then he's left, and I'm left here. He got shut down by Russians. The Russians shut that down. Oh, sorry, I snorted. I'm sorry. That's fucking hilarious. That's just preaching too hard. You got to shut down, dude. The Russians shut you down, man.
You ask about and it's so weird, man. I mean, it's not just that, but it was also.
Sorry, that was really funny. Just and another thing, click. Yeah.
Russia, man, Russia.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, no, it wasn't just that too. It was like the Russian propaganda was one thing, and then Matt Staggs, who used to run Disinfo, was the booker on the Joe Rogan Experience back in the day too.
Oh no way!
Yeah, Disinfo had pretty.
We were connected to Joe Rogan.
Both Joe Rogan and Russian propaganda. And
that makes sense. Abby Barton's been on Joe Rogan a bunch.
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, God, I ended up getting together, and we didn't do a podcast, but we just bullshitted for a while with Raymond Wiley, who used to run the Disinfo site.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he wasn't aware of this stuff either, but yeah, it's like, when you look at, like, Randall Carlson, like, yeah, there's a time in Disinfo, like, a lot of the guests that became regulars on a Joe Rogan, that happened because of Matt Staggs, who was running Disinfo at the time. So yeah, there was absolutely this bleed through between Rogan. So yeah, I mean, Disinfo was one of those things. It's great that it died, but like, man, yeah, literal Russian propaganda, Rogan. Like I said, man, my Facebook feed was a goddamn horror show. Like, I'm not even like lying. Like, I was like mildly traumatized because like I got to watch this. Like, I watched this propaganda working like firsthand. Like when the pandemic hit, and this is even after this has been gone for years. Like 60% of my feed was COVID denialism. Like, I mean, that's when I, it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, no. I enjoy it. I like that. There's, as you said, like there's a confidence in what we're talking about when it comes to the other, right? The quote unquote the other, and like your connection to them and how you see them. And then there's also a confidence into how you are understanding, like even being an editor in chief of a pretty big, website, digital news publication.
Yeah, remember those?
Of seeing the background, of things that are going. So yeah, they're all like very mysterious conundrums to me, and I love learning about them.
Yeah, man. I will not even say like I would not wish getting minorly popular through a website that traffics in conspiracy theories in the years between 2013 and like 2017, which is when it ended, or 18, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think 18.
I think it was 18 was the end.
18 was when it finally ended. It's like I don't recommend that. Like, what an awful time, like because like the right fascism just infiltrated conspiracy theory culture. Like, I mean, just complete. I mean, and we know that. Like Alex Jones, like had what am I thinking of? Like Trump's campaign manager was literally watching the elections on Alex Jones' show. There was like such a bleed through there. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, no. God. Now that you mentioned that, Michelle, I tried to listen to Joe Rogan like once. Like when I started running the site, because Matt Staggs was there was connection. Like I tried to listen to his website.
I like Duncan Trussell.
Exactly. Yeah, I liked him. And like. But I could never listen to Rogan. Like I never made it through more than 15 minutes of the show. And this is before I just didn't vibe with the guy. And this is before I knew about the political stuff. But then I started seeing more and more people when I was running this info talking about his right-wing politics, and I didn't really know shit. And it was always really controversial. Anytime people would say anything about it, they just oh, he's not a right-winger or whatever, And so like within like 5 minutes of digging, I realized that in 2012, like he went on the Tonight Show and endorsed Ron Paul for president on the freaking Tonight Show, right? Like Rogan went on the Tonight, and still nobody. So this is all the way back in 2012, and like what I'm saying, like this, like back then, Ron Paul had gotten straight up busted putting out Ron Paul, like he was busted putting out white supremacist literature. The guy literally published and that was known. So Rogan went on the Tonight Show and said the white supremacist dude, and it was right in the middle of the Tea Party movement, which is a fundamentally racist white supremacist.
Oh yeah, that was the worst.
And so he's been awful forever. Like all the way back in 2012 when he was supposedly cool. That's when Rogan was cool, man. Like no, he was a piece of shit who went on national television and endorsed a white supremacist candidate for like, And
I think it's simple for me. It's very simple for me when it comes to Joe Rogan. It's he's just a vessel for whoever's across the table from him. He's not a good comedian. I don't consider him a comedian. He's a whatever, actor, host, but like he just happens to be a vessel for whoever is sitting across the table from him. So when I listen to the show, I don't even think about Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And I especially don't think about Joe Rogan's like, just bullshit about anything especially when it comes to comedy.
Well,
dude's not funny. Dude fucks a stool on stage.
That would be another part of the Joe Rogan. Like I was trying to get into the podcast, and you're right. I knew he was a comedian back in like 2013, and so I looked up on his comedy routines. And yes, I watched an entire hour-long Joe Rogan special and didn't laugh once. Like
it's not good.
I literally did not laugh.
Like
I was just like, I thought someone was kind of sexist. I mean, I agree.
And he's such an elitist just because he made his way being a podcaster, but he's not. He's trying to act like he's a popular comedian, but he's not. He's a popular podcaster.
You're like, when I listen to Joe Rogan's speeches, like, man, I've never been able to make it through fucking 15 minutes of that shit. I like Duncan, though. I haven't listened to Duncan in a while, but
Duncan Trussell's awesome. Yeah. Duncan Trussell Family Hour was I was a big fan years ago of it. I haven't kept up.
Me too. I will say the same thing. Yeah. I mean, Duncan, what's weird about him is like I like him, and I don't try and hold it against him because it's like he's got that materialism in him, and like I find it frustrating, and yet it's just like that's just who he is, and like we were just talking about how hard it is to break yourself out of that. So when I listen to it, I sometimes just get annoyed with like, yeah, you and your materialism, whatever, and yet I'm like, you're a nice guy though, he's a cool guy. It's just I know how hard it is to get over.
He's sweet, he's funny, he's got the best ads, I love Duncan Trussell. He's also good friends with one of my favorite Pacific Northwest musicians ever, named Emil Amos, who plays drums in Ohm and is the Holy Sons.
I love Ohm. Yeah, I've never listened to Holy Sons. I've seen Ohm live, man. Yeah, Ohm are great.
Ohm are here with me here in Portland.
Oh, really?
October 1st. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
To see him. But yeah, they and I knew Holy Sons before I knew Duncan Trussell, so that was like a fun synchronicity. Like, what? Like, why is Emil Amos always on this? No one knows him.
I went and saw Duncan Trussell live at one point. It was pretty cool. Like, as people getting excited about spirituality, and to get on that topic too. I mean, one of the things that I got when I was writing more about politics, it was like, God, and I still look back at my life and like there was like a year and a half of my life where like the most popular thing I was doing was like political writing, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like,
you were writing, but you were also writing a train. Like, I did not envy you. There was like you as the editor for Disinfo. It was a super popular site, and you were just like hounded by fucking trolls all the time.
That was like part of the culture.
Like anybody that had any opinion though on that side. And I think that's just a culture at large, if I can be real.
Exactly.
That's just fucking a culture at large. Yeah.
Having your internet and writing blow up right at the advent of the social media age. I mean, it's something I'm going to talk about. I mean, because we were talking about this when we were hanging out. Like I understood the concept of clickbait, immediately. Like I'm disturbed by it, but like I got it and I'm good at it. I don't really do it anymore. But like, I mean, if I want to troll for clicks, like I got how that works better than I think like most of the other.
I remember your EA co-editing article was the thing that like blew him up, and then I remember your like Aleister Crowley is a dick article.
Yeah, I almost don't want to talk about that because I like weird thing about that is that article was so popular that like for like literally a year I couldn't open my social media without like answering questions about Aleister.
That's what I'm saying. Like it was.
I'm at the point where I'm like, man.
But now like I feel like even Thelemites are like, yeah, he was a dick, but he created something that we enjoy as like.
Remember when I wrote that like that was I think God, what was that 2015? Yeah, like that was like pre-Me Too and shit. Mm-hmm. You know what's weird about that article too is like I swear to God, after I did that, there was like places like Vice and like other places that were doing like almost like cancel culture kind of stuff, like
sure.
Gandhi. Like it was weird. Like I actually like started a trend of like writing about like how shitty like certain historical figures were, like because right after that I saw all these pieces that were kind of like
the way I took it too. The way I took it is I never really thought about it as like a hit piece, on Aleister Crowley or Crowley. Excuse me, Crowley like holy. But anyways, but no, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, all good. No.
I have friend. I was just kidding. We're gonna get flamed for everything.
I mean, the thing is, I'll talk shit about his magic.
No. What I was saying. like I never took it as like a Crowley hit piece. I always took it as, here's like, stop deifying human beings.
Yeah.
Stop deifying human beings, like who you're, creating as a Christ-like entity or figure. This hero worship is like cancerous in a way, because like you're batting yourself in the corner about human error, and it's like, yeah, we should celebrate human error, but also understand that like we shouldn't celebrate it to the idea that their human errors are what we should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I talk shit about his. I mean, I think Crowley was a shit magician. As long, I mean, and the other thing I would say, the one thing I didn't talk about this, and this is what I was like, part of the reason I wrote that article is because so many Crowley people that I interacted with on the internet were such assholes. But more to the point, 3 different ones of my fans like emailed me with the exact same story, 2 women and 1 man, and it was like, oh, I got in the occult and I met this guy online who's a big Crowley fan, and then I met him in real life and he sexually abused me and gave me PTSD. Like, I had 3 different fans reach out to me. That is part of why that article exists. Like, the exact same story, like 2 women and 1 man, and it's just like there's just bad vibes there, man. Like, stay away from fucking Thelema. Like, stay the fuck away from it. Like, it's like it's not good. Like, and it's shitty magic. But anyways, I want to skip over that. What was it? What were you saying? Like, what? Anyways, I lost the train. There was something I wanted to circle back there, but I forgot about it. It wasn't Crowley. It was more like doing clickbait. Oh, E.A. Ketting. That's what I wanted to circle back to. Right?
Yeah.
So I wrote that, and you're right. Same deal. Like, I got so many people talking about that. Like, I got so much reaction to the piece. Some like years after the fact, people would message me about that one. God, there was one woman who thought like that E.A. Ketting had cursed. She was a schizophrenic woman that thought that E.A. Ketting had cursed her. Can you see me still, by the way? Like, my video, yes. I can't see anything as long as I can hear you, though. So as long as you can see, it's fine.
I can see you and hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't know what happened to my video went out for whatever reason, but I don't really need it.
Oh, interesting. Oh, we'll end soon, anyways.
Yeah. Anyways, so that Ketting piece, I wrote it, and I thought maybe I was being. Oh, so anyways, yeah, there was a schizophrenic woman who thought that Ketting had cursed her and kept trying to write me for years, trying to get me to undo the curse. Yeah, that was awkward. I'm just like, I don't know. But I thought maybe I was being a bit of a cynical asshole with that shit. But one of Ketting's fans ended up killing fucking 2 women in the UK. Like that, like literally that just happened like a year ago. Like, I thought maybe I was being too big of an asshole, but like, no, like I was exactly right. That guy was fucking dangerous. And one of his fans murdered 2 women. And it's so sad too. She murdered 2 women doing he murdered 2 women doing a spell to try and win the fucking lottery. Seriously. Like, he murdered 2 women as like an offering to, God, what is the dumb Lucifuge? Like, making his offering to Lucifuge. So like, again, like I was just like, I literally thought I was being maybe a bit of a dick when I wrote that piece. It was enormously popular, but like, no, I wasn't even being nearly a big enough dick. Like, that guy was literally dangerous, and his shitty.
Well, he finally got kicked off of YouTube.
Yep. I feel because of that. Because of the murders, people waged a campaign to get him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. The murders. Yeah, that's what did it. Yeah, that's what. And that was like last year.
That was just like a year. Yeah, you can, if you look up. Yeah, he was literally on like BBC. I saw like a segment like on because the murders happened in the UK. It was like 2. Yeah, and that's what I was saying at the time. The guy's literally talking about how to do magic spells to like kill people. It's like,
the best comment. Checks out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Indeed.
So, but thanks so much, man. And
always good, man.
We're gonna do this in person when I'm back up there.
Dude, yeah, let me know. I'm always cool to chat. And like I said, like it's amazingly synchronous that you happen to move to the same street that my mom lived on. And man, yeah,
that's
like,
right.
I'm looking. I like just an excuse to go back to that neighborhood. Is like I'm totally down with that. So yeah, I mean, we have to. Now that I know that, we got to do this live one of these days. So,
it would be amazing, like in a hauntological sense, to like walk with you around our neighborhood, and you tell me like how things have changed, because things are still changing.
Oh God, man. I got to be honest. It's a bit overwhelming. That's the one thing I can say about living in Seattle is Seattle, I mean, it's grown by like 20-25% in like 10 years. Like, we've been one of the fastest growing cities, and like in this time where technology has changed everything so much in such a quick period of time, then to throw on top of that living in a city that's like changed faster than like most other places, like it's a lot, man. It's a lot. It's a lot. It makes being 45 feel like age 145.
I feel that. Well, thank you everybody for showing up, and thanks for joining me. Hopefully my voice sounds okay. I'm using a brand new mic and a laptop. This is the Travel Keats, and this has been Prag Magic with
Haunt on, people.
Mr. Thad McKraken. Yes, haunt on, folks. And just like that,
when we are doing the will of our true self, we are inevitably doing the will of the universe. In magic, these are seen as indistinguishable. That every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself. And as long as you are doing the will of the universe, then it is impossible to do anything wrong.